Hey guys, I'm Tim Kotzman here with Ethan and Jesse. Ethan, you just got out of the Microsoft meeting. Do you want to walk us through all of that, maybe rewinding a little bit all the way through today with the Microsoft vote?
Yeah, absolutely. So just as anticipated, the shareholder proposal didn't pass. I don't think we had any illusions about the likelihood of it passing when we submitted it. But they didn't announce the vote tally yet. Sometimes at these meetings, they'll say that, the proposal passed with 52% or it didn't pass with 3% or 14%. And what was really important for us is crossing that 5% threshold. Because if you cross 5%, then you can resubmit next year. And you get to go back to Microsoft next year when the price is $200K and say, you guys fumbled last year, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And when I submitted the proposal in June, it was, I think Bitcoin is at 61,000. And so, and when I spoke to them in July, I think it was like 68. And when this all started going viral in October, it was at like 70. And so they've had a lot of opportunities. And we offered them to withdraw the proposal. And they still, said no, kept a closed mind, refused to meet with Saylor. We offered them that too. And so if we get to go back next year and resubmit, that's applied, it's additional pressure. And so when they file the 8K form with the SEC, either tomorrow or, Friday, Monday, the next couple of days, we'll get to see the exact vote totals. And if we get, something substantially high, like 30, 40%, that's, that will send shockwaves through other corporations because that's considered substantial in the world of shareholder proposals where 99% of them don't pass. And when they do pass, they pass because the big five, I'm speaking of the big three asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and the big two proxy advisory services, ISS and Glass Lewis, that's when they decide, okay, this will pass because they really have the crux of the vote. And so, I'm hopeful that we'll get a decent percentage. But as of today, I don't think we learned anything new because we knew it wasn't going to pass and we still don't know the percentage.
And when a proposal does not pass, is that percentage of the vote that's yes somewhere between like 0 and 1% or 0 and 5%, or what do you usually see there?
It depends. It depends what kind of proposal, where you're coming from. So at the National Center, we do a lot of like anti-ESG proposals. So trying to get corporations to drop DEI or audit their DEI programs or just go after like their most radical energy commitments, like the net zero ones or stuff like that, relationship with China kind of stuff. And so we submit those kinds of proposals. Sometimes they usually get like 2 or 3%. Sometimes they'll get like 7 or 8. When the left submits proposals asking them, to make more net zero commitments, more DEI, stuff like that, those proposals get like 20% very often. They still don't pass, but they'll still it's only 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 passes. But those have a better chance. But for something like this, a Bitcoin proposal, it's completely novel in the world of shareholder proposals. I think that on a new proposal, to get a decent percentage on something that, because you have to remember, it's the same voters for every meeting, for every company. So yes, we submitted it to Microsoft, but when we submit it now to Amazon, we're not appealing to different voters. It's the same people. So it's like you get another chance to engage with them over and over every time. It shouldn't be that way, but the way it's very centralized, our market now. And so now for a first ever proposal, something like 20% would be, wild. That'd be crazy.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, what would you consider
that'd be a win
to be a win?
Yeah.
Okay.
For now.
Give or take 20%. Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Stampseed. If you're in cold storage, you know how important it is to protect your seed phrase. That's why I recommend you head over to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. This seed phrase storage device is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount across the website. That's TIM15.
I would really think, though, going back to what Ethan said, that just 5% would be a huge win. Because for the reasons you said, you could resubmit this next year and the board doesn't have the right to just automatically kick the proposal out. And I think it ratchets up too. So if you submit it next year, then you have to get 15%. Otherwise, the board can boot the proposal. So hopefully it's 5%. We'll have to see what the numbers say. But maybe, sorry to interrupt you, Tim, but I had one question on some of those meetings you mentioned. Maybe you could speak a little bit to what the sentiment is among those large institutions that are representing, ETFs, and you don't have to speak to specifics on kind of what they're saying or what you're saying to them, but maybe you could just give us the feel for how they responded to this proposal.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think that's a great question because I think that's who we really have to win over, maybe even more than the corporations, because they vote, right? So they're the ones that are going to decide. I mean, the corporations can negotiate with us and adopt a Bitcoin treasury policy without a proposal, which is what we hope for it to not have to get to a vote. But by the time it gets to a vote, you have to win over the asset managers. So with this vote coming up, I set up meetings with BlackRock, with State Street, with Geode Capital. I tried to with Fidelity, they ignored me, and tried to with the proxy advisory services, ISS and Glass Lewis, who basically advise the pension funds how to vote. And so there was mixed feelings there. On one hand, we know that BlackRock is in on Bitcoin, but there's a sort of disconnect between the investment stewardship teams at these companies, which is the department that votes the shares, and, like the top brass at the companies, like Larry Fink. I'm no fan of Larry Fink, obviously. Every day I'm out here submitting proposals against, largely what he's pushing, ESG. But he's certainly pro Bitcoin, and at least that's great. And so, but he's not the one sitting there voting on, because the thing about, there's 12 directors at every company, 5 or 6 shareholder proposals at every company. So you're talking about thousands and thousands of items to vote on. They own so many companies, tens of thousands. They have to have a team that sits there and sorts through every single director, every single proposal, And so there's just so many so they have this team that's dedicated to voting. But the kinds of people that are on these teams, on these investment stewardship teams, and I got the sense of this more when I met with them, they're sort of like a little bit woke millennial type sometimes, that are, or they're not Bitcoiners, so we have to orange pill them. But to their credit, they had a much more open mind on this proposal than any of the other proposals that I've submitted. Over 100 proposals in my life on many issues, and a lot of times they basically tell me to go take a hike. And now they listened. We got a 40-minute meeting, really listening, asking questions. Obviously, they didn't support the proposal, but so it's a mixed bag. I think there's definitely a sort of a way that they think about the world that we have to sort of crack. But there is an openness there to Bitcoin that they don't have in other areas.
Yeah, I was surprised, Ethan, the one meeting that I attended, how kind of uninformed the point person was. It seemed like her response was sort of, we don't want to step into the shoes of the company and require them to buy Bitcoin. And we had to then walk back and say, whoa, that's not even what the proposal says. We're just, simply saying that the board needs to conduct this assessment, and, you've received nothing from Microsoft kind of laying out what they've done with respect to this assessment, no kind of analysis. This isn't obligating them to do anything at all. And that sort of fundamental misunderstanding was really depressing in my mind for someone that controls a lot of the vote of these big companies.
Exactly. Right. So Jesse attended one of these meetings with me and Andrew Hones to an asset manager. I guess we don't have to say which one, but the head, as he explained, the head of their stewardship department didn't even know what the proposal requested. And so that's common because they have thousands of proposals that they deal with. And so we really have to go and, make a case for them. And sometimes different asset managers have different standards. So there are some that tell us, we don't want you to request a report of a company because that's wasteful. It'll cost them $200,000 or whatever. And, why do we need a report? Just ask them to do the thing. And then others will say, we don't want to pressure companies to do things. Why don't you ask a report? And from our perspective, we only asked a report because we didn't want to risk the SEC omitting it from the ballot, which if you go a little farther and say, hey, shareholders request that Microsoft buy Bitcoin, then Microsoft could go to the SEC and say, we're requesting you to omit this from the ballot on this and this and these terms. And so then we would have to argue with them to try to prove to them that it's a legitimate proposal and it doesn't violate any regulations. And because there's bias at the SEC, sometimes we lose those where we shouldn't. So that's why we requested an assessment. And also we just sort of tried to humbly get corporations thinking about this without trying to, pressure them. And so that's where we came from. And to think that even an assessment was beyond the pale for some of these asset managers. Some of them, like Fidelity and BlackRock, are buying a lot of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. It shows that there's a real disconnect there, and there's some corruption that we need to fix.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there with the wording of the proposal being key. I think folks think that you can come in and say, hey, why don't you make a very aggressive proposal and mandate that the board adopts 5% of their treasury to Bitcoin, but it'll just get tossed out. There's lots of ways that boards can take a shareholder proposal and then find a rationale, including under kind of the Exchange Act or their organizational documents, to then kick that proposal out, and it never even sees the light of day or gets to the shareholders to vote. And so that's why it is very important when folks are looking at submitting these to make sure that they know what they're doing and that they're being careful with the language and that they're prepared to kind of go to battle with the SEC once the company submits a no action letter to the SEC to try to avoid submitting this proposal to shareholders. So there's kind of a lot of technical aspects to it that I think folks don't see that your organization and you, Ethan, are handling and navigating really well.
Thank you. I think that's a great point, because on one hand, we want to inspire your average shareholder to go out and submit proposals too. Because, why is there only, a couple of us doing this? There should be a lot more. And there could be a lot more. And if it becomes a real grassroots movement, that's more powerful. On the other hand, we also want to be careful because, as Jesse mentioned, if you submit something that they could then go to the SEC and omit from the ballot, then they set a precedent of, okay, you can't submit this kind of proposal for the next 5 years because we've already decided that it's not permissible to be voted on. And so you have to be careful about what you ask. And so if anyone is listening out there as a shareholder of a big company, wants to submit a proposal, just reach out to us. We're happy to advise you and, walk you through the steps that on one hand, we could have other people submitting proposals as well. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, we can also sort of make sure to not overstep our bounds and set a precedent that gives corporations some protection from us.
Makes sense. Jesse, did you have a few questions on the Amazon side of things?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Ethan could just talk to us about that, how that came about, and what you're thinking there, and when is the meeting, I guess? How much time do we have to lobby voters?
All right. Well, we have a lot more time now because this meeting is in May. The exact date isn't announced yet, but it's going to be sometime in May. After, again, when I submitted the Microsoft proposal in June, I did not anticipate the reaction the cyber hornets sort of made it what it is. Most of the credit goes to them, to the Bitcoin community. To me, this is just another 500 words I wrote to a company telling them that they have a fiduciary duty to do right by shareholders, you know? So, but once I saw that reaction, I was like, okay, let me do a couple more companies. So I started thinking, who else? And also, it's a matter of deadline. So see a lot of people writing on Twitter, like, why not Apple? The Apple deadline passed, so it can't. But until next year, which would be for the spring 2026 meeting. But Amazon, the deadline is this week. So I submitted one there. And the thought was just exactly the same. I wish I could say that there's some kind of a unique angle compared to Microsoft, but it's exactly the same problem. They're not any different. I mean, Microsoft has $75 billion in cash. Amazon has $88 billion in cash equivalents, and marketable securities. So same problem, right? And so they're losing shareholders' money. And we're basically just going to them saying, listen, we're trying to help Amazon shareholders, stay ahead of this curve. There was sound money long before corporations like Amazon existed. Not anymore. We're in a fiat era, and there will be sound money with Bitcoin long after they're gone. But while we're going through this adoption phase, we believe that it's your fiduciary duty to be forward thinking and adopt. And so that's basically what we're just trying to say to corporations without too much pressure. And that's why I thought to submit it to Amazon as well. And we're thinking about a couple more companies.
Ethan, could you speak to the kind of ownership requirement where when you look at Amazon, does your organization hold shares in Amazon adequate to meet that threshold so you can submit a shareholder proposal, or do you go and find a shareholder or group of shareholders that meet that threshold and then represent them?
Okay, so you could do it either way. What we do is we just already have shares of all these big companies because our whole thing is just submitting shareholder proposals. And we've been doing it for 17 years. I've been doing it for 3, but the National Center has. And so they own shares of Amazon. You need to own $2,000 worth for at least 3 years, $15,000 worth for at least 2 years, or $25,000 worth for at least 1 year in order to be eligible to submit a proposal. And it can't dip below that amount at any point. So like if you have $2,500 worth of Amazon and just a really wild day, like I think like in 2020, like there's a huge dip and it dips below to like 1,900 for like even a 5 minutes, boom, the 3-year clock resets. Mm-hmm. And so, if you have enough and you've held it for enough years, you're eligible. And so it could be done any way. You can submit it yourself under your own name. We haven't done this, but it's certainly possible. We can reach out, find other shareholders, and submit in their name. And basically, whoever owns the shares, that's the person on record submitting the proposal.
Cool. Well, I didn't have anything else specific to Amazon. I think it's going to be exciting to see, and I think it's going to get probably even more attention, I suspect, than the Microsoft proposal has. And one thing I guess I would want to stress is that Microsoft or Amazon, if these proposals get voted down, it doesn't mean that the board can't put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. It was never a vote to kind of decide on whether or not to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. It was a vote on obligating the board to take some basic steps to assess putting it on their balance sheet. So I wouldn't be too dejected by the no vote here.
Exactly. We're just sort of using this method to be the first knocking on the door. That's sort of how we look at it. And I think I said this to you last time I was on the podcast, but there have been many situations in which I've seen us submit a proposal to a company, asking them to do a thing, them opposing it, the vote getting 2-3%, and then 2 months later they do the thing that we asked. Mm-hmm. Because it's a matter of public opinion. And so what's important is that we now made this an issue. Well, the cyber hornets also made it an issue. And I think we have a better chance with Amazon to get a higher percentage. Also because, or at least to settle, because Jeff Bezos is still involved in the company. And when you have a founder he's not the CEO, but he's still the chairman. And when you have a founder, instrumental in operating the company, that makes a difference. So, look at what Eric Semler was able to do with Semler Scientific, and obviously Saylor with MicroStrategy. A lot of times, these companies are sort of run by committee, that they're run by the board members that were put in there by the Big Five, in order to run the company a certain way. A lot of these companies, when you see these companies, they sort of all feel the same. They have the same policies, the same language, the same sort of partisan messaging. It's because they have a lot of the same board members, a lot of overlap. The pool of candidates that the directors come from, that are selected by the Big Five and put in there by the Big Five, they're there to uphold the views of the Big Five. Again, top three asset managers and the top two proxy advisory services. And so, but when you have a founder at a company, that's when there's a better chance maybe that you can sort of sway them, because they have say over their own company.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Michael Saylor will be willing to make the same offer to Amazon to come out and meet for an hour, and we'll pull back this shareholder proposal, or your organization, not Michael per se?
So he made that offer to Microsoft, and I was the one that actually made the offer to Microsoft, on Saylor's behalf. I said to them, listen, Michael will meet with you, with Satya, one-on-one in person, anywhere in the world for 1 hour, and then you could avoid all of this publicity. We'll withdraw the proposal, everything. You just have to listen for an hour, and they still said no. So that shows how close-minded they are. But I hope that Amazon will be a little different. But I think Michael Saylor already has been so generous with his time, and he put out that presentation for Microsoft, and it applies to Amazon, right? As soon as that presentation came out, I sent it to Amazon too. So they saw it, and they told me that they saw it. They responded. And so all these companies, every company that I'm considering submitting it to, I'm sending them that same video. And so we don't have to chase them around. We're just making them very clearly to them that this is the truth. You're losing your shareholders' money by holding a lot of cash and a lot of bonds. Here's how you adopt in this new time. We believe you have a fiduciary duty to do so. If not, you'll fall behind and you'll get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. And that's it.
Well, I think you've done an awesome job. I think I think a lot of folks didn't have this on the kind of timeline for Bitcoin or this cycle. And I think you've changed the conversation, regardless of how the vote turned out at Microsoft. It's definitely shifted the, Overton window, I guess, around Bitcoin and corporations. So it's a huge win. And I think we'll keep moving forward. I would also say that the folks should know that there's a ton of Bitcoiners who have, are very busy people, but have behind the scenes done a ton of work and helped out with this proposal a great deal. Yep. So know that that's happening, and that there's a lot of people that care about this movement.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as this started, getting attention, I immediately reached out. I didn't have any connections in the Bitcoin community, but I immediately reached out to as many people as I could, which is how I got in contact with you and with Jesse and a bunch of people. And I'm just trying to, because I'm very pro Bitcoin. I'm personally a Bitcoiner and been for a couple of years, but I'm not certainly as eloquent as a lot of the other guys. And so as soon as I got an opportunity, to speak at the Microsoft meeting, I was like, no, I'm passing the ball, giving it to Saylor. He's better than, why wouldn't I? And so that's what I'm trying to do, and include as many people as possible so that we can really also show these companies that it's not, obviously I know what I think of my own proposal that I submitted to them, sort of giving companies like, here's a third party view. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do. And there's a lot of people working on it. And we hope for the sake of shareholders that companies will do this sooner rather than later.
Anything else on your end, Jesse? Any thoughts, closing thoughts or other questions?
No closing thoughts other than to say thanks to both of you, and thanks to Ethan. Keep keep doing the good work.
Thanks, Jesse, and thanks for all your help with this, and thanks, Tim, for getting the word out, breaking the news to everyone, and you're on the ground, really reporting on Bitcoin treasuries before everyone else, and so I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time.
Absolutely, thank you.